The riverboat's whistle split the humid Texas air as Theresa Dalton clutched her carpetbag to her chest, watching the muddy banks of the Trinity River draw closer while her heart hammered against her ribs. She had never felt more alone in her 22 years than she did in that moment, standing on the deck as the other passengers gathered their belongings with the casual confidence of people who knew where they belonged. She did not. Her cousin Margaret, who had promised to meet her in Lone Pine, Texas, had sent no word in months, and Theresa had sold everything she owned back in Virginia to make this journey west after her parents had succumbed to fever. The boat docked with a grinding shudder, and Theresa descended the gangplank on trembling legs. The town sprawled before her in the August heat of 1873, a collection of weathered wooden buildings that looked like they might blow away in a strong wind. Dust hung in the air, and the smell of horses and unwashed men mingled with the scent of cooking meat from somewhere nearby. She stepped onto the dock, her good traveling dress already wilting in the oppressive humidity, and looked around for any sign of her cousin. Nobody came. An hour passed, then two. The riverboat departed with another mournful whistle, and Theresa felt her last connection to civilization slip away. She sat on a barrel near the dock, her fingers white-knuckled on the handle of her bag, fighting back tears that would do her no good. She had exactly $12 to her name, no place to stay, and knew not a single soul in this rough frontier town. "Miss, you cannot stay here," the dock manager, a grizzled man with tobacco-stained teeth, gestured at her impatiently. "We close at sundown." "I am waiting for someone," Theresa said, though her voice lacked conviction. "Well, wait somewhere else. There is a boarding house on Main Street if you have coin." Theresa stood reluctantly, her legs stiff from sitting, and made her way up the dirt path toward the main thoroughfare. The sun hung low on the horizon, painting everything in shades of orange and gold that might have been beautiful if she had not been so frightened. Men in dusty work clothes eyed her as she passed, and she kept her gaze fixed straight ahead, walking as purposefully as she could manage. The boarding house was full. So was the hotel. The third place she tried, a ramshackle establishment above a saloon, had a room available, but when the proprietor named his price and looked her up and down in a way that made her skin crawl, Theresa fled back into the street. Night fell quickly in Texas, and with it came a drop in temperature that did little to ease Theresa's rising panic. She found herself back near the river, huddled on a bench outside a closed mercantile, wondering if she would have to sleep in the street like a vagrant. Her stomach growled, but she could not bring herself to spend any of her precious money on food when she had no idea how long it would have to last. "Miss Dalton," Theresa's head snapped up. A man stood in the shadows near the corner of the building, and for a moment fear paralyzed her. Then he stepped into the lamplight, and she saw he was younger than she had first thought, perhaps 27 or 28, with dark hair that needed cutting and several days' worth of stubble on his jaw. He wore worn denim pants, a faded blue shirt, and a hat that had seen better days. A gun belt hung at his hip, which did nothing to ease her nervousness. "How do you know my name?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Your cousin Margaret. She worked at the ranch where I am foreman. She asked me to meet the boat today, but my horse threw a shoe this morning, and by the time I got into town, the boat had already left." He took a step closer, and Theresa could see his face more clearly now. He had kind eyes, she thought, despite his rough appearance. "Name is Patrick Donovan. Margaret wrote me about you coming to stay with her." "Where is she?" Hope flared in Theresa's chest. Why did she not come herself? Patrick's expression darkened, and he removed his hat, turning it in his hands. "Miss, I am sorry to be the one to tell you this. Margaret took sick about 3 weeks back. Fever. She passed on before we could get a doctor out from Dallas." The words hit Theresa like a physical blow. She stood there, swaying slightly, feeling the last foundation of her plans crumble into dust. Margaret was dead. She had come all this way, spent everything she had, and there was nothing waiting for her but another grave she could not even visit. "I am sorry," Patrick said quietly. "She was a good woman. Everyone at the ranch thought highly of her." "I have nowhere to go," Theresa heard herself say. The words came out flat, emotionless, as if someone else was speaking. "I spent everything to come here. I have $12 and no family left in the world." Patrick stood silent for a moment, clearly uncomfortable with her raw honesty. Then he settled his hat back on his head and picked up her carpetbag from where she had set it beside the bench. "Come on then. I will take you out to the ranch. Mrs. Patterson, the owner, she is a decent sort. We will figure something out." "I cannot impose," Theresa said, though even as the words left her mouth she knew how foolish they were. What choice did she have? It is no imposition. Besides, you would be doing me a favor. Mrs. Patterson has been after me to find someone to help with the house and the cooking since Margaret passed. She cannot manage it all herself anymore, not with her rheumatism acting up. He gestured toward the end of the street where a horse stood tied to a hitching post. "It is a few hours' ride, but the moon is bright enough to see by." Theresa looked at this stranger, this cowboy who had appeared out of nowhere with an offer that seemed too good to be true. Every instinct told her to be cautious, to protect herself. But what was the alternative? Sleep in the street and hope for better luck tomorrow. She had no reason to trust Patrick Donovan, but she had no reason not to either, and he had known Margaret's name, known she was coming. "Fear nothing now," Patrick said, as if reading her hesitation. "I give you my word as a gentleman that you will be safe. I will not let any harm come to you." There was something in the way he said it, a quiet certainty that made Theresa believe him. She nodded and followed him to his horse, a sturdy chestnut gelding that snorted softly as they approached. Patrick tied her carpetbag behind the saddle, then turned to her. "Have you ridden before?" "A little when I was younger." "You will ride in front then. Easier to keep you steady that way." He mounted first, then reached down to help her up. Theresa hesitated only a moment before taking his hand. His grip was strong and calloused, the hand of someone who worked hard for his living. He pulled her up effortlessly, and she found herself seated sideways in front of him, his arms bracketing her on either side as he took up the reins. "Hold on to the saddle horn if you need to," he said. And then they were moving, the horse's gait smooth as they left the lights of Lone Pine behind and headed into the darkness. The ride gave Theresa too much time to think. She was acutely aware of Patrick's presence behind her, the warmth of his body blocking the night chill, the smell of leather and horse and something else, maybe sage or mesquite. He did not try to make conversation, for which she was grateful. Her mind spun with everything that had happened, with grief for Margaret, whom she had not seen since they were children but who had been her last hope, with fear of what came next. "Tell me about Margaret," she finally said, needing to break the silence. "What was she like here?" Patrick was quiet for a moment, guiding the horse around a stand of prickly pear cactus. "She was cheerful, always humming while she worked, made the best apple pie I have ever tasted. She talked about you sometimes, said you were the smart one in the family, always reading books. She wrote that there were opportunities here, that a woman could make something of herself in Texas." Theresa's voice caught. "I suppose she was wrong about that." "No, she was right. Texas is not easy, but it is fair if you are willing to work hard." Margaret had saved up enough to buy her own little piece of land. She was going to build a boarding house, be her own boss. The fever just came on too fast. They rode in silence for a while longer, and Theresa felt exhaustion creeping through her bones. The rocking motion of the horse was almost soothing. And despite everything, she found her eyes growing heavy. Once she jerked awake to find herself leaning back against Patrick's chest, and she straightened quickly, her cheeks burning with embarrassment even though it was too dark for him to see her blush. "It is all right," he said quietly. "You have had a long day. Sleep if you need to. I will not let you fall." But Theresa could not allow herself that vulnerability, not yet, so she forced her eyes to stay open as they crossed the dark landscape. The moon rode high overhead, turning everything silver and black, and she could hear the distant howl of a coyote somewhere out in the brush. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, lights appeared in the distance. Patrick guided the horse toward them, and as they drew closer, Theresa could make out the shapes of buildings, a large house with a wraparound porch, several barns and outbuildings, corrals where horses stood sleeping. "This is the Double P Ranch," Patrick said. "Mrs. Patterson's late husband started it 30 years ago. She runs it now with help from me and a few other hands." He dismounted first, then helped Theresa down. Her legs nearly buckled when her feet hit the ground, and Patrick steadied her with a hand on her elbow. "Easy now. Let me get Mrs. Patterson. You wait here." He strode up to the house and knocked firmly on the door. After a moment, lamplight spilled out and a woman appeared, older, perhaps in her 60s, wearing a nightgown and wrapper with her gray hair in a long braid over one shoulder. "Patrick, what in heaven's name are you doing out at this hour? And who is that with you?" "Mrs. Patterson, this is Margaret Dalton's cousin Theresa, the one she was expecting. I am sorry to wake you, but she arrived today and has nowhere to go. I thought perhaps you might still need help in the house." Mrs. Patterson squinted at Theresa, then gestured impatiently. "Well, do not just stand there in the dark, child. Come in, come in. Patrick, bring her bag to the spare room upstairs. I will put some coffee on." The house was warm and smelled of wood smoke and dried herbs. Mrs. Patterson ushered Theresa into the kitchen and pressed her into a chair at a large wooden table. "You look half dead, girl. When did you last eat?" "Yesterday morning, I think." Theresa's voice sounded distant to her own ears. "Lord have mercy, Mrs. Patterson moved with surprising speed for someone who claimed rheumatism, pulling out bread and cold chicken, cheese and pickles. She set the food in front of Theresa along with a glass of milk. "Eat. We can talk after you have gotten something in your stomach." Theresa did not need to be told twice. She fell on the food with an appetite she had not felt in days, too hungry to be embarrassed by her lack of manners. Mrs. Patterson and Patrick stood talking in low voices near the stove, and Theresa caught fragments of their conversation. "The girl has had a shock learning about Margaret like that. She has nowhere else, Mrs. Patterson. I could not leave her in town. You did right. We will sort it out in the morning." When Theresa had eaten her fill, Mrs. Patterson led her upstairs to a small but clean room with an iron-framed bed, a washstand, and a window that looked out over the dark yard. Patrick had already brought her bag up and set it by the door. "There is water in the pitcher and clean towels," Mrs. Patterson said. "We will talk properly tomorrow, but for tonight, just rest. You are safe here, child. Whatever else happens, remember that." Theresa managed to thank her before Mrs. Patterson left, closing the door softly behind her. Alone at last, Theresa sank onto the bed and finally let herself cry, great shuddering sobs that shook her whole body. She cried for her parents, for Margaret, for the life she had left behind and the uncertain future that stretched before her. She cried until she had no tears left, and then she lay down fully clothed on top of the quilt and fell into an exhausted sleep. Morning came too early, announced by the sound of a rooster crowing and the smell of coffee drifting up from downstairs. Theresa washed her face in the basin and did her best to make herself presentable, changing into a simple calico dress and pinning her dark hair into a neat bun. In the mirror, she looked pale and hollow-eyed, but there was nothing to be done about that. Downstairs, she found Mrs. Patterson at the stove frying eggs and bacon. The older woman turned and looked her up and down appraisingly. "You clean up well. Sit down and have some breakfast, then we will talk about your situation." Theresa sat and accepted a plate heaped with more food than she could possibly eat. Mrs. Patterson poured coffee for them both and settled into the chair across from her with a slight wince that spoke of painful joints. "Patrick tells me you have no family left and limited funds," Mrs. Patterson said bluntly. "Is that the truth of it?" "Yes, madam. My parents died of fever last spring. Margaret was the only family I had left, and I did not learn of her passing until I arrived yesterday." Mrs. Patterson nodded. "Margaret was a good worker and a decent soul. I was sorry to lose her. I suppose Patrick mentioned I need help around here." "He did, madam. My hands are not what they used to be, and running this ranch means I cannot spend all day cooking and cleaning. The men need feeding, the house needs keeping, and there is mending and washing and 100 other tasks. I can offer you room and board plus $15 a month. That is more than fair for this area. In exchange, I expect hard work and honesty. Can you cook?" "Yes, madam. My mother taught me well." "Can you handle yourself around rough men?" "The hands are decent enough, but they are cowboys, not drawing-room gentlemen." Theresa thought of Patrick, of his quiet kindness the night before. "I believe I can manage, madam." "Then we have a deal. You will start today. I will show you where everything is and you can begin with dinner preparations. We have 6 hands plus Patrick who eat in the bunkhouse, but they come up here for their meals. Patrick usually joins me for breakfast in the main house since he has paperwork to go over." As if summoned by his name, Patrick appeared in the doorway, hat in hand. "Morning, Mrs. Patterson." "Miss Dalton." "Morning, Patrick. Theresa will be staying on to help with the house. See that the men know to be on their best behavior." "Yes, madam." Patrick's eyes met Theresa's and he gave her a small nod. "Welcome to the Double P, Miss Dalton." "Thank you, Mr. Donovan, for everything." "Just Patrick is fine. We do not stand on ceremony out here." He poured himself a cup of coffee and leaned against the counter. "Mrs. Patterson, I wanted to discuss moving the herd to the south pasture. The grass is getting sparse up north." As they talked ranch business, Theresa finished her breakfast and began gathering the dishes. Mrs. Patterson waved her off. "Let me show you around first. You can start cleaning up after." The tour took over an hour. The main house was larger than it had seemed in the dark, with a parlor, dining room, kitchen, and Mrs. Patterson's bedroom downstairs, plus 3 smaller bedrooms upstairs. There was a root cellar, a smokehouse, a chicken coop where Theresa was informed she would be collecting eggs each morning, and a vegetable garden that needed weeding. Mrs. Patterson walked her through everything, explaining her routines and expectations, and Theresa's head spun trying to remember it all. But it was work, honest work, and Theresa threw herself into it gratefully. Work meant she did not have to think about how alone she was, how far from everything familiar. Work meant she had a purpose, a reason to get up in the morning. She spent that first day learning the layout of the kitchen, preparing a dinner of stew and biscuits for the hungry ranch hands who tramped in at sunset smelling of horses and leather and hard labor. Patrick was the last to arrive, and he took a seat at the end of the long table in the dining room where the men ate. Theresa served them all, then retreated to the kitchen to eat her own meal with Mrs. Patterson. Through the open door, she could hear the men talking and laughing, their voices rough but not unkind. "That is a fine stew, Miss Dalton," one of them called out. "Best we have had since Margaret passed." "Thank you," Theresa called back, feeling a small glow of pride. The days settled into a rhythm. Theresa rose before dawn to start coffee and breakfast, collected eggs from the chickens, helped Mrs. Patterson with the garden and the washing and the endless other tasks that came with running a household. She cooked 3 meals a day for 8 people, learning to make the kind of hearty, filling food that cowboys needed. She mended shirts and darned socks and swept floors and did it all over again the next day. It was exhausting work, but Theresa found she did not mind. The physical labor tired her body so much that she fell asleep quickly each night instead of lying awake worrying. Mrs. Patterson was a fair employer, quick to correct, but also quick to praise, and the ranch hands treated her with respect, perhaps warned by Patrick to mind their manners. Patrick himself was a constant presence, always seeming to be around when heavy lifting needed doing or when Theresa had to carry something from the barn to the house. He did not talk much, but his quiet competence was reassuring. Theresa found herself watching him sometimes when she thought he was not looking, noticing the way he handled his horse with gentle firmness, the way he listened carefully when the other hands talked, the way he removed his hat before entering the house even though Mrs. Patterson told him it was not necessary. 2 weeks after Theresa's arrival, a violent thunderstorm rolled across the prairie. The sky turned black as night in the middle of the afternoon, and rain pounded down in sheets that turned the yard to mud. Theresa was in the kitchen making bread when she heard a tremendous crack of thunder that shook the house to its foundations. The lights flickered and went out. Mrs. Patterson appeared with candles. Just a summer storm. They blow through quick but fierce. We should check the windows upstairs and make sure they are latched tight. They went up together, and in the spare bedroom that had been Margaret's, they found the window had blown open, rain pouring in to soak the floor and bed. Theresa rushed to close it, fighting the wind that tried to tear it from her hands. She finally got it latched and turned to find water pooling on the wooden floor. "Get some towels," Mrs. Patterson said. "We need to mop this up before it damages the boards." Theresa ran to get towels from the linen closet, and together they worked to soak up the water. Mrs. Patterson was on her knees beside the bed when she suddenly gasped and pressed a hand to her chest. "Mrs. Patterson." Theresa dropped her towel and reached for the older woman. "Just my heart." Acting up again. Mrs. Patterson's face had gone pale, and sweat beaded on her forehead despite the coolness of the room. "Help me to my room." Theresa got an arm around her and helped her stand, then supported her weight as they made their way slowly down the stairs. By the time they reached Mrs. Patterson's bedroom, the older woman was breathing hard and leaning heavily on Theresa. "I need to get Patrick," Theresa said, helping Mrs. Patterson onto the bed. "He is out checking the stock in this mess. Just let me rest. I will be fine." But Mrs. Patterson did not look fine. Her color was bad, and her breathing remained labored. Theresa pulled off her wet shoes and covered her with a blanket, then stood there feeling helpless. She knew nothing about heart troubles, had no idea what to do. The storm lasted another hour, and by the time it blew itself out, Mrs. Patterson had fallen into a restless sleep. Theresa stayed with her, checking her pulse the way her mother had taught her, feeling it flutter unsteadily under her fingers. As soon as she heard the men returning, she ran to the door. Patrick was unsaddling his horse in the barn, soaked to the skin. He looked up as Theresa splashed through the puddles toward him. "Miss Dalton, what is wrong?" "It is Mrs. Patterson, her heart. She had an episode during the storm. I think you should send for a doctor." Patrick's face went grim. He did not ask questions, just turned to one of the other hands. "Billy, ride to town and fetch Doc Henderson. Tell him it is urgent." Then to Theresa, "Show me." They went back to the house, and Patrick followed Theresa to Mrs. Patterson's room. The older woman was awake now, and she scowled when she saw Patrick dripping water on her floor. "I told the girl I am fine. No need to make a fuss." "With respect, madam, you do not look fine. Doc Henderson will be here as soon as Billy can fetch him." Mrs. Patterson grumbled but did not argue further. Patrick pulled up a chair and sat beside the bed, and Theresa went to make tea, thinking it might help. When she returned with a tray, Patrick was holding Mrs. Patterson's hand, talking to her quietly about the ranch, about the cattle, about mundane things that seemed to calm her. Doc Henderson arrived as the sun was setting, a gray-haired man with spectacles who examined Mrs. Patterson thoroughly while Theresa and Patrick waited in the hall. "Her heart is weak," the doctor said when he emerged. "She needs rest, no stress, and someone to look after her properly. No more running around doing heavy work." "I will be fine," Mrs. Patterson called from the bed. "Stop talking about me like I am not here." Doc Henderson gave Patrick a meaningful look. "She is stubborn, but she is not invincible. See that she follows my orders, or next time might be her last." After the doctor left, Patrick and Theresa stood in the kitchen, both of them processing what this meant. Finally, Patrick spoke, keeping his voice low so Mrs. Patterson would not hear. "She will not like it, but she needs to step back from running things day to day. I can handle the ranch operation, but the house, the accounts, dealing with supplies and such, that is going to fall to you if you are willing." "I do not know anything about managing a ranch household," Theresa protested. "You have been doing it for 2 weeks already. Mrs. Patterson can advise you, but you are going to have to be the one who does the actual work. It is a lot to ask, and if you want more money, I can arrange that." Theresa shook her head. "The money is fair. I am just worried I will make mistakes. We all make mistakes, but Mrs. Patterson trusts you, and so do I." Patrick met her eyes, and Theresa felt something flutter in her chest that had nothing to do with fear. "You are stronger than you think, Theresa. I saw that the first night when you were sitting alone in town, refusing to give up even though you had every reason to." "I was terrified," Theresa admitted. "Being brave does not mean not being scared. It means doing what needs doing anyway." He smiled, a real smile that transformed his whole face, and Theresa found herself smiling back. Over the following weeks, Theresa stepped into her expanded role. She took over ordering supplies, keeping the household accounts, managing the 2 women from town who came once a week to help with the heavy washing. Mrs. Patterson advised from her bed where Doc Henderson had ordered her to stay for at least a month. But Theresa made the decisions and did the work. It was overwhelming at first, but Theresa discovered she had a head for organization. She created lists and schedules, found ways to make the work more efficient. She learned to deal with the merchants in town, driving the wagon herself with Patrick or one of the hands as escort. She proved she could handle difficult situations, like when one of the cowboys got kicked by a horse and she had to clean and bandage a nasty wound. And through it all, Patrick was there. Not hovering, not interfering, but present. He fixed the sticky drawer in the kitchen. He brought her fresh vegetables from the garden. He made sure she took breaks and did not work herself into exhaustion the way she was inclined to do. They fell into a pattern of having coffee together in the evenings after everyone else had gone to bed, sitting at the kitchen table and talking about their days, about the ranch, about everything and nothing. Theresa learned that Patrick had come to Texas from Missouri 10 years earlier, looking for opportunity and finding it at the Double P. He had worked his way up from a regular hand to foreman, earning Mrs. Patterson's trust through hard work and honesty. He had been engaged once, back in Missouri, but the girl had married someone else while Patrick was away on a cattle drive. He had never gone back. "Do you ever regret it?" Theresa asked one evening. "Coming here instead of staying where you knew people?" Patrick considered the question, cradling his coffee cup in both hands. Sometimes I wonder what my life would have been like if I had made different choices. But regret? No. Texas gave me a fresh start, a chance to be someone other than the poor farmer's son everyone expected to fail. Out here, a man is what he makes of himself, not what his family name says he should be. Or a woman, Theresa said softly. I think that is what Margaret meant in her letters, that here I could be more than just someone's daughter or wife. I could be myself. You are already more than you know. Patrick's voice was quiet, serious. You took a terrible situation and made something of it. You saved Mrs. Patterson's life by getting help when she needed it. You have earned every man's respect on this ranch by your hard work. That is not nothing, Theresa. She felt her cheeks warm at his praise. You are the one who saved me that first night. If you had not come looking for me, I do not know what would have happened. I think you would have figured something out. You are a survivor. Their eyes met across the table, and Theresa felt the air between them change, becoming charged with something unspoken. Patrick's gaze dropped to her lips, and her breath caught. For a moment, she thought he might lean across the table and kiss her, and she realized she wanted him to. But then Patrick cleared his throat and stood abruptly. It is late. You should get some rest. Yes, of course. Theresa tried to hide her disappointment as she gathered the cups and took them to the sink. After Patrick left, she stood at the window looking out at the dark yard, her heart beating faster than it should. She was falling for him, she realized. Somewhere between that first terrifying night and now, Patrick Donovan had become more than just the foreman who had helped her. He had become important to her in a way that made her nervous and excited all at once. But what if he did not feel the same way? What if he only saw her as the housekeeper, someone he had to be kind to because it was his job? The thought made her chest ache, but she pushed it aside. She had more immediate concerns, like getting through each day and helping Mrs. Patterson recover. August turned to September, and the brutal Texas heat began to ease slightly. Mrs. Patterson was up and moving around again, though Doc Henderson had forbidden her from doing any heavy work. She spent her days directing Theresa and complaining about being treated like an invalid, which everyone took as a sign that she was getting better. One afternoon, Patrick came to the house looking for Theresa. She was in the root cellar taking inventory of the preserved foods, making notes on what they would need to get through the winter. He appeared in the doorway, his form silhouetted against the bright square of daylight. "Miss Dalton, do you have a moment?" "Of course." Theresa climbed the stairs, brushing dust from her skirt. "What is it?" "There is a dance in town Saturday night. I wondered if you might like to go." Patrick shifted his weight, looking uncharacteristically uncomfortable. "Mrs. Patterson said she could spare you for the evening, and I thought you might enjoy getting away from the ranch for a bit." Theresa's heart leaped. "Are you asking me to accompany you to the dance?" "If you want to, yes. If you would rather not, I understand. I know I am just a cowboy and you are an educated woman from Virginia, and maybe you would prefer someone more refined. But I thought I would ask anyway, because I enjoy your company, and I think you might enjoy the music and the dancing, and just having a bit of fun after working so hard all these weeks." The words came out in a rush and Patrick's ears had gone red. Theresa could not help but smile at his nervousness. "I would very much like to go with you, Patrick." His face lit up. "Really? That is excellent. I will borrow the wagon so you do not have to ride, and we can leave around 6 if that suits you." "That sounds perfect." Patrick grinned, looking younger and happier than she had ever seen him, then seemed to catch himself and straightened his face. "All right then. I will let you get back to your work." After he left, Theresa stood in the yard with a ridiculous smile on her face. A dance with Patrick. She had not been dancing since before her parents died, had not had reason to think about pretty dresses or how she looked beyond being neat and presentable for work. Now, she found herself mentally going through the limited contents of her trunk, wondering what she could possibly wear. That evening, she confided her wardrobe dilemma to Mrs. Patterson, who waved a dismissive hand. "Margaret left her things here. You are about the same size. Go look in her trunk in the storage room. I am sure there is something suitable." Theresa felt strange going through her dead cousin's possessions, but Mrs. Patterson was right. Margaret had owned a beautiful blue dress, simple but well made, that fit Theresa nearly perfectly. She tried it on in her room and looked at herself in the small mirror, hardly recognizing the woman who looked back. She had lost weight since arriving in Texas, her face thinner, her body leaner from the hard work. But there was something else too, a confidence in her bearing that had not been there before. Saturday arrived with agonizing slowness. Theresa did her morning chores in a daze, barely paying attention to what she was doing. Mrs. Patterson finally took pity on her and shooed her upstairs to get ready early. "You are useless to me today anyway, mooning around like a lovesick calf. Go make yourself pretty. Patrick is a good man, Theresa, one of the best I have known. You could do a lot worse." "I am not, we are not." "It is just a dance," Theresa protested weakly. Mrs. Patterson laughed. "Child, I may be old, but I am not blind. That boy has been sweet on you since the day he brought you here, and you light up like a Christmas candle whenever he walks into a room. Go on now." Theresa escaped to her room, her cheeks burning. Was it really that obvious? Did Patrick know how she felt? Did the ranch hands? She pushed the thoughts aside and focused on getting ready, washing carefully and putting on the blue dress, pinning her hair up in a style she hoped looked sophisticated. She had no jewelry except her mother's simple gold locket, which she fastened around her neck. When she came downstairs, Patrick was waiting in the parlor, and the look on his face when he saw her made all her nervousness worth it. He had cleaned up too, wearing dark pants and a white shirt she had never seen before, his hair slicked back and his jaw freshly shaved. "You look beautiful," he said, his voice rough. "Thank you. You look very handsome yourself." They stood there for an awkward moment until Mrs. Patterson appeared and made shooing motions. "Go on, you two, have fun. And Patrick, do not have her out too late. Sunday is still a work day." "Yes, madam." The ride into Lone Pine took about an hour, and Theresa sat beside Patrick on the wagon seat, acutely aware of the few inches of space between them. They made small talk about the ranch, the weather, anything to fill the silence. But it was not an uncomfortable silence, Theresa realized. There was an anticipation to it, a sense of possibility. The dance was being held in the town's largest building, which served as a meeting hall and church. Music spilled out into the street as they arrived, fiddles and guitars playing a lively tune. Patrick helped Theresa down from the wagon, his hands lingering on her waist just a moment longer than strictly necessary, and then they went inside. The hall was packed with people, ranchers and their families, townspeople, cowboys cleaned up for the occasion. Lanterns hung from the rafters, casting warm light over everything. A makeshift band played on a small stage at one end, and couples spun across the floor in patterns that looked chaotic, but somehow worked. "You know how to dance?" Patrick asked, leaning close so she could hear him over the music. "My mother taught me when I was young, but I am probably rusty. That makes two of us." He took her hand and led her onto the floor just as a slower song began. His hand settled at her waist, and Theresa placed hers on his shoulder, and then they were moving, swaying to the music. Patrick was a better dancer than he had claimed, or maybe they just fit well together. Theresa let herself relax into his lead, feeling the strength in his frame, the warmth of his hand through the thin fabric of her dress. Around them, other couples danced, but Theresa barely noticed them. Her entire focus had narrowed to Patrick, to the way he was looking at her like she was the only woman in the room. "I am glad you came with me tonight," Patrick said quietly. "I am glad you asked. I have wanted to for a while now. Ask you, I mean. But I did not know if you would want to be seen with someone like me. You could have any man here, Theresa. Someone with money, with prospects. I am just a ranch foreman with no land of my own and not much saved up." Theresa pulled back slightly so she could look him in the eye. "Patrick, I do not care about any of that. You are a good man, a kind man. You saved me when I had nothing and no one. You treat me with respect and you make me feel safe. That matters more than money or prospects. You deserve more than safe," Patrick said, his voice intense. "You deserve someone who can give you a real future, not just 3 meals a day and a roof over your head." "Maybe I get to decide what I deserve," Theresa said gently. "And maybe what I want is someone who looks at me the way you do right now." Patrick's eyes darkened and his hand tightened on her waist. "And how is that, like I matter? Like I am more than just the housekeeper or the poor cousin who had nowhere else to go? Like you see me, Patrick, the real me?" "I do see you," Patrick said. "I have seen you from the beginning. You are brave and smart and stronger than you know. You work harder than anyone I have met and you never complain even when things are difficult. You are beautiful, inside and out, and I cannot stop thinking about you." Theresa's breath caught. "Patrick, I know I should not say these things. I know I am overstepping, but I cannot keep pretending I feel nothing when being near you is the best part of my day. If you do not feel the same, just tell me and I will stop. I will keep things professional and we can forget I ever said anything." "I do not want to forget," Theresa said. "I feel the same way. I have for weeks now, but I was afraid to say anything because I thought maybe you were just being kind out of obligation." A slow smile spread across Patrick's face. "Not obligation. Never that." The song ended, but they stayed where they were, standing close, looking at each other with everything finally out in the open between them. Then someone bumped into Patrick from behind, breaking the spell, and he stepped back reluctantly. "You want to get some air?" he asked. Theresa nodded, suddenly needing to be away from the crowd, to have a moment alone with him. Patrick led her outside to where a few benches had been set up for those who needed a break from dancing. The night was cool and clear, stars brilliant overhead in a way they never were in the humid Virginia air Theresa remembered from childhood. They sat on a bench slightly apart from the others, and Patrick took her hand, threading his fingers through hers. It was such a simple gesture, but it made Theresa's heart race. "I do not want to rush you," Patrick said. "I know you have been through a lot, losing your parents and then Margaret, and I know you might need time to figure out what you want. But I want you to know that I am serious about this, about you. I am not looking for a casual flirtation." "What are you looking for?" Theresa asked. Patrick turned to face her fully. "I am looking for a partner, someone to build a life with. I am looking for a woman I can come home to every night and wake up beside every morning. I am looking for love, Theresa, and I think I have found it with you." Tears pricked Theresa's eyes. "It is too soon to say such things. We have only known each other a few months. When you know, you know. But if you need more time, I can wait. I would wait as long as it takes." Theresa shook her head. "I do not need more time. I know what I feel. I love you, Patrick. I think I have been falling for you since that first night when you promised me I had nothing to fear. You have been keeping that promise every day since." Patrick's eyes shone in the starlight. "Can I kiss you?" "Yes." He leaned in slowly, giving her time to change her mind, but Theresa did not want to change her mind. When his lips met hers, it was gentle at first, tentative, a question. She answered by kissing him back, her free hand coming up to cup his jaw, feeling the slight roughness there despite his recent shave. Patrick made a sound low in his throat and deepened the kiss, and Theresa felt heat flood through her entire body. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Patrick rested his forehead against hers. "Marry me." "What?" Theresa laughed, startled. "Patrick, we just had our first kiss." "I know, and I know it is fast, but I also know that you are the woman I want to spend my life with. I cannot offer you much right now, but I am good at what I do and I work hard. I have been saving money for years and I have enough to buy some land, start building a house. It would take time, but we could have our own place eventually, our own ranch. I could give you a good life, Theresa. Maybe not a fancy one, but a good one. A happy one." Theresa's mind spun. It was crazy, marrying a man she had known for only a few months. It was impulsive and reckless and completely unlike her usual careful nature. But then again, coming to Texas had been impulsive too, and look how that had turned out. Patrick was good and kind and honest, and she loved him. What more did she need? "Yes," she heard herself say. "Yes, I will marry you." Patrick's face split into the biggest smile she had ever seen, and he kissed her again, picking her up and spinning her around until she was dizzy and laughing. When he set her down, there were people watching from the doorway of the hall, and someone started clapping. Then others joined in until there was a round of applause for them. They stayed at the dance another hour, but Theresa barely remembered any of it. She was engaged. She was going to marry Patrick Donovan and spend the rest of her life in Texas. The thought should have terrified her, but instead, she felt only joy and a sense of rightness, like all the pieces of her life had finally fallen into place. On the ride back to the ranch, Theresa sat pressed against Patrick's side, his arm around her shoulders, both of them grinning like fools. They talked about the future, about where they might build their house, about what kind of cattle they would raise. "Mrs. Patterson is going to be surprised," Theresa said. "I do not think so. She has been dropping hints for weeks that I should stop being a coward and tell you how I feel." Patrick laughed. "She even offered to give me time off to court you properly. Why did you not take her up on it?" "Because I was afraid you would say no. It is easier to keep quiet and hope than to risk rejection." "I could never have said no to you," Theresa said softly. "You had my heart before I even knew it was yours to give." They arrived back at the ranch near midnight to find Mrs. Patterson still awake, sitting in the kitchen with a cup of tea. She took one look at their joined hands and their happy faces and smiled. "About time," she said. "I suppose congratulations are in order. We are getting married," Patrick announced, unable to keep the pride from his voice. "If that is all right with you, madam." "All right. It is the best news I have heard in years. Theresa, you have found yourself a good man, and Patrick, you have found yourself a treasure. I am happy for both of you." They talked for a while, making tentative plans. Mrs. Patterson insisted they could use the ranch house for the ceremony if they wanted, could have the reception right there with all the hands and the people from town invited. Patrick mentioned his savings, his plan to buy land and start their own place. Mrs. Patterson leaned back in her chair, studying them both. "I have a proposal for you to consider. I am not getting any younger and my heart is not what it used to be. This ranch is too much for me to handle alone, and I have no children to leave it to. What if instead of buying land somewhere else, you bought into the Double P as partners? Patrick, you already know this place inside and out, and Theresa has proven she can manage the household. You could build your own house on the property, raise your family here, and eventually, when I am gone, the whole place would be yours." Theresa and Patrick looked at each other in shock. It was an incredible offer, far more than either of them had dared hope for. "We could not take advantage of your generosity like that," Patrick said. This ranch is worth more than I have saved. Then you can pay me a fair price for half shares now and pay off the rest over time. I trust you to be honest about it. And in the meantime, you keep running things the way you have been, only as a partner instead of just a foreman. What do you say?" "I say yes," Theresa said, looking at Patrick. "If you want to, I want to," Patrick said. "More than anything, Mrs. Patterson, you have been more than generous to me over the years. I promise I will work hard to make the Double P prosper." "I know you will. Now it is late and we are all tired. We can work out the details in the coming days. Go get some rest, both of you." Theresa went upstairs feeling like she was floating. In the space of one evening, her entire life had changed. She was engaged to the man she loved, and they were going to have their own ranch, their own future. It felt like a dream, but when she looked at the ring Patrick had slipped on her finger, a simple silver band that had belonged to his grandmother, she knew it was real. The next weeks passed in a flurry of activity. They set a wedding date for October, giving them enough time to make preparations, but not so long that they had to wait forever. Patrick rode into town and filed the paperwork to become Mrs. Patterson's business partner, and they drew up a contract that was fair to everyone. With Mrs. Patterson's blessing, Patrick chose a spot near the creek where they would build their house, and he spent every spare moment clearing the land and laying the foundation. Theresa wrote to distant relatives back in Virginia, inviting them to the wedding, though she doubted they would make the trip. She worked with Mrs. Patterson to plan the menu for the reception, to make her dress from fabric ordered specially from Dallas. She threw herself into the preparations because it gave her something to focus on besides the fact that she would soon be a married woman. Not that she had any doubts about marrying Patrick. Every day confirmed she had made the right choice. He was steady and reliable, but also thoughtful in ways that surprised her. He brought her wildflowers picked on his rides around the property. He made sure she took breaks when she was working too hard. He listened when she talked about missing her parents and did not try to fix her grief, just let her feel it. And when they stole moments alone, sitting on the porch after everyone else had gone to bed or walking to the creek together on Sunday afternoons, the attraction between them was undeniable. Patrick kissed her until she was breathless, but he always stopped before things went too far, mindful of propriety even though they were engaged. "I want to do this right," he told her one evening when she complained about his restraint. "I want to be able to look you in the eye on our wedding day without any shame, and I want our wedding night to be special, something we both remember forever." "You are too honorable for your own good," Theresa said, but she loved him for it. The day before the wedding, Theresa's nerves finally caught up with her. She was in the kitchen making pies when her hands started shaking so badly she had to set down the rolling pin. Mrs. Patterson took one look at her and steered her to a chair. "What is wrong, child?" "I am terrified," Theresa admitted. "What if I am a terrible wife? What if I do not know how to be a partner the way Patrick needs? What if I fail?" "Everyone is scared before their wedding. It is natural. You are making a big commitment, promising your life to another person." "But Theresa, you and Patrick are good together. I have seen it these past months. You balance each other, support each other. That is what marriage is, two people choosing each other every day even when it is hard, even when you fight or disagree or life throws difficulties at you. You will both make mistakes, but you will learn together." "What if he realizes he made a mistake? What if I am not enough?" Mrs. Patterson laughed. "Child, that boy looks at you like you hung the moon and stars. He would walk through fire for you. Trust that. Trust him. And most importantly, trust yourself. You have survived things that would have broken lesser women. You are strong enough for this." Theresa took a shaky breath and nodded. "You are right. I am just nervous." "Good nervous or bad nervous?" "Good nervous, I think." like standing at the edge of something wonderful and terrifying all at once. That is exactly what marriage is. Now, let us finish these pies. We have a wedding to prepare for. The wedding day dawned clear and cool, perfect October weather. Theresa woke early and went through her morning routine almost on autopilot, her mind already on the ceremony that would take place that afternoon. She had breakfast with Mrs. Patterson, neither of them eating much, both too excited. Mid-morning, some of the women from nearby ranches arrived to help Theresa get ready. They filled the kitchen with laughter and advice, some of it helpful, some of it making Theresa blush. They helped her into her dress, a simple but elegant creation of cream-colored silk with lace at the collar and cuffs. They pinned her hair up in an elaborate style decorated with small white flowers, and Mrs. Patterson loaned her pearl earrings that had belonged to her own mother. When Theresa looked at herself in the mirror, she hardly recognized the woman staring back. She looked older, more mature, and there was a glow about her that came from pure happiness. "You are a beautiful bride," Mrs. Patterson said, her eyes bright with tears. "Margaret would have been so proud to see you like this." "I wish she were here," Theresa said softly. "I wish my parents were here too. They are, in a way. Love does not end with death, Theresa. They are watching over you, happy that you have found someone who loves you the way you deserve to be loved." People started arriving around 3 o'clock, filling up the ranch yard with wagons and horses. The ceremony would take place outside under the oak tree near the house, with the reception following in the barn that had been cleaned out and decorated for the occasion. The ranch hands had worked hard to make everything perfect, stringing up lanterns and laying down fresh hay, setting up tables for the food. Theresa waited in the house while Mrs. Patterson went out to check that everything was ready. Through the window, she could see people gathering, could see Patrick standing under the oak tree with the preacher who had ridden out from Lone Pine. Patrick wore a new black suit that made him look devastatingly handsome, and Theresa's heart raced just looking at him. Then it was time. Mrs. Patterson came to fetch her, squeezing her hand reassuringly. They walked out together and every eye turned to watch Theresa approach. She saw friendly faces, ranch hands she had cooked for, townspeople she had met on her trips to Lone Pine, neighbors from other ranches. But her focus was on Patrick, on the way his face lit up when he saw her, on the love shining in his eyes. She reached him, and he took her hand, holding it tight like he never wanted to let go. The ceremony was simple and traditional. They exchanged vows, promising to love and honor each other for the rest of their lives. Patrick slipped a gold ring onto her finger, and she did the same for him. And when the preacher pronounced them husband and wife, Patrick kissed her with such tenderness that Theresa felt tears slip down her cheeks. Everyone cheered and congratulated them, and then the party began. There was music and dancing, eating and drinking. Someone had brought a fiddle, another a guitar, and they played lively tunes that had people spinning across the barn floor. Theresa danced with Patrick, with the ranch hands, with men from neighboring properties. She laughed until her sides hurt and ate until she was stuffed, and through it all, she kept catching Patrick's eye across the crowd, sharing secret smiles that promised more intimate celebrations to come. As the sun set, Patrick pulled her aside. "Ready to see our house? It is finished." Theresa had not been allowed to visit the site for the past week, Patrick insisting he wanted it to be a surprise. "Finished enough. Come on." They slipped away from the party, and Patrick led her through the darkening evening toward the creek. As they crested a small rise, Theresa saw it. A small cabin with a porch facing the water, smoke rising from the chimney, lamplight glowing in the windows. "Oh, Patrick, it is perfect. It is small, just 2 rooms for now, but we can add on as we need to as our family grows." He squeezed her hand. "Welcome home, Mrs. Donovan, Mrs. Donovan. Theresa Donovan." She had a new name, a new life, a new home. Patrick swept her up in his arms and carried her over the threshold, setting her down gently in the main room. It was simple but cozy, with a stone fireplace, a table and chairs, a kitchen area on one side. Through an open door, she could see the bedroom with a beautiful carved bed that must have cost Patrick a significant portion of his savings. "You like it?" Patrick asked, suddenly uncertain. "I love it. I love you. I cannot believe this is real, that I am here with you. Believe it." Patrick pulled her close, his hands settling at her waist. "You are my wife now, Theresa. Mine to love and protect and cherish for the rest of my life. I will do everything in my power to make you happy." "You already make me happy, just by being who you are." Patrick kissed her then, slow and deep, and Theresa felt desire curl through her body. His hands moved to the buttons of her dress, and she did not stop him. This was her husband, her partner, and she wanted this, wanted him with an intensity that surprised her. They moved to the bedroom, helping each other undress with hands that trembled slightly from nerves and anticipation. When Patrick laid her down on the bed and covered her body with his, Theresa felt a moment of fear at the unknown. But Patrick was gentle, patient, whispering words of love as he showed her the pleasures that could be shared between husband and wife. There was some pain at first, but it faded quickly, replaced by sensations that made Theresa cry out with pleasure. Afterward, they lay tangled together, skin against skin, hearts beating in sync. Patrick traced lazy patterns on her arm, and Theresa felt complete in a way she never had before. "Are you all right?" Patrick asked softly. "More than all right. That was wonderful. It will get even better as we learn each other. Tonight was just the beginning." Theresa smiled against his chest. "I look forward to all the beginnings we will share." They fell asleep like that, wrapped in each other's arms, and when Theresa woke in the morning to find Patrick watching her with such love in his eyes, she knew she had found where she belonged. The months that followed were the happiest of Theresa's life. She and Patrick settled into married life, learning each other's rhythms and habits. Mornings, Patrick rose early to tend to ranch business while Theresa made breakfast. Evenings, they would sit together on their porch and watch the sun set over the creek. Nights were for loving, for exploring the physical connection that deepened with each passing day. They worked hard, both of them. The Double P prospered under their joint management. Patrick proved to be an excellent rancher with a good eye for cattle and land management. Theresa kept the books and managed the household, and between them, they made decisions that benefited the ranch. Mrs. Patterson, true to her word, stepped back and let them run things, content to sit on her porch and offer advice when asked. Winter came, milder than the Virginia winters Theresa remembered, but still cold enough to make her grateful for the fireplace Patrick had built. They spent long evenings by the fire, Patrick reading the newspaper while Theresa sewed or worked on her knitting. Sometimes they just talked, sharing stories from their pasts, dreams for their future. "I want children," Patrick said one night, his hand resting on Theresa's stomach. "A whole house full of them if you are willing." "I am willing," Theresa said. "Though perhaps we could start with just one and see how we manage." They both laughed, and Patrick kissed her. And that night they loved each other with the specific intention of creating new life. Spring brought a surprise. Theresa woke one morning feeling nauseous, and by the end of the week, she was certain she was pregnant. Doc Henderson confirmed it, and Patrick was so excited he literally shouted with joy, picking Theresa up and spinning her around until she begged him to stop before she got sick. "We are going to have a baby," he kept saying, as if he could not quite believe it. "I am going to be a father." "You are going to be a wonderful father," Theresa assured him. Though I hope you realize babies require more than just enthusiasm. I will learn. We will learn together, just like we have learned everything else. The pregnancy was not easy. Theresa was sick for the first few months, barely able to keep food down. Patrick fretted over her constantly, bringing her water and crackers, holding her hair back when she was ill. Mrs. Patterson told him to stop hovering, but he could not seem to help himself. As the months passed, and Theresa's belly grew round with their child, she felt a sense of wonder at the life growing inside her. This baby was made from her love with Patrick, a physical manifestation of their union. She spent hours imagining what the child would look like, whether it would have Patrick's dark hair or her lighter coloring, whether it would be a boy or a girl. Summer arrived again, marking nearly a year since Theresa had first stepped off that riverboat, alone and afraid. Now she was anything but alone. She had a husband who adored her, a home that was truly hers, a community that had accepted her, and a baby on the way. Sometimes she had to pinch herself to believe it was real. The baby came in late August during a thunderstorm, as if announcing its arrival with dramatic flair. Theresa's water broke in the middle of dinner and Patrick went pale as milk. "It is all right," Theresa said, trying to stay calm even though fear coursed through her. "Go get Mrs. Patterson and send someone for the doctor." Patrick moved faster than she had ever seen him move, and within minutes Mrs. Patterson was there, taking charge with the competence of someone who had birthed many babies in her lifetime. Doc Henderson arrived an hour later, by which point Theresa was in serious labor, panting through contractions that seemed to last forever. "You are doing fine," Mrs. Patterson kept saying. "Just breathe through it. The baby will come when it is ready." Patrick wanted to stay with her, but Mrs. Patterson shooed him out. "This is women's work. Go pace somewhere else and let us manage." But Theresa did not want him to leave. "Please, I want him here." Mrs. Patterson looked surprised but nodded. "All right then. Patrick, you stay by her head and keep her calm. And for heaven's sake, do not faint on me." "I will not faint," Patrick said indignantly, but he looked green around the edges. The labor lasted through the night. Theresa had never experienced such pain, wave after wave of it crashing through her body. But Patrick was there the whole time, holding her hand, whispering encouragement, letting her squeeze his fingers until she thought she might break them. Dawn was breaking when Doc Henderson finally said, "One more push, Theresa. Give me one more good push." Theresa bore down with everything she had, and suddenly there was release and then the most beautiful sound she had ever heard, her baby crying. "It is a boy," Doc Henderson announced, holding up a squalling, red-faced infant. "A healthy boy." Patrick was crying, tears streaming down his face as he kissed Theresa's forehead. "You did it. He is perfect. You are perfect." They cleaned the baby and wrapped him in a soft blanket, then placed him in Theresa's arms. She looked down at the tiny face, at the eyes that were trying to focus on her, and felt her heart expand with a love so fierce it took her breath away. "Hello, little one," she whispered. "I am your mama." "What should we name him?" Patrick asked, gently touching the baby's tiny hand. They had discussed names but never settled on one. Now, looking at her son, Theresa knew. James Patrick Donovan." "James," Patrick repeated, testing it out. "I like that. Welcome to the world, James." The next weeks were exhausting and wonderful in equal measure. James was a good baby overall, but he still woke every few hours to nurse, leaving Theresa perpetually tired. Patrick helped as much as he could, changing diapers and walking the floor with James when he was fussy, getting up in the night so Theresa did not have to face it alone. "You do not have to do this," Theresa told him one night when James was being particularly difficult. "You need to sleep so you can work tomorrow." "You work too," Patrick pointed out. "We are partners, remember? That means we share everything, including the middle-of-the-night crying sessions. Theresa fell in love with him all over again in those moments, watching him cradle their son with such gentleness, singing off key lullabies that somehow worked to soothe James when nothing else would. Autumn came again, and with it James's first steps, his first words. Dada came first, much to Patrick's delight and Theresa's mock indignation. Mama followed soon after, and then he was off, babbling constantly in his own language that only occasionally resembled English. The double P continued to thrive. They added more cattle, hired another hand to help with the increased work. Patrick and Theresa made plans to expand their house, to add more rooms for the children they both hoped to have. Mrs. Patterson's health remained stable, and she doted on James, spoiling him shamelessly with treats and stories. 2 years after James was born, Theresa found herself pregnant again. This time, the pregnancy was easier, and when their daughter was born in the spring, Patrick cried just as much as he had with James. "She looks like you," he said, studying the baby's delicate features. "She is going to be as beautiful as her mother." They named her Emily Rose, and James, now a toddler, was fascinated by his baby sister. He wanted to help with everything, and Theresa had to watch him carefully to make sure his enthusiasm did not accidentally harm the baby. Life settled into a new rhythm with 2 children. The house Patrick built felt full of life, of laughter and love. Theresa could not remember the frightened woman she had been when she first arrived in Lone Pine. That woman felt like a stranger, someone from another lifetime. Another 2 years passed, and a third child arrived, another boy they named Samuel. Mrs. Patterson passed away peacefully in her sleep not long after, leaving the ranch entirely to Patrick and Theresa as she had promised. They grieved her loss, but they also celebrated her life and the gift she had given them. The years flowed by, marked by the milestones of their children growing. James started school in town. Emily learned to ride a horse before she could barely walk. Samuel proved to have his father's gift with animals, able to calm even the most skittish calf. More children came until their house rang with the sound of 5 voices, all demanding attention, food, help with this or that. Patrick and Theresa grew older together, their love deepening with each passing year. They had arguments, of course, disagreements about how to run the ranch or raise the children. But they always talked it through, always came back to each other at the end of the day. One evening, when their oldest was 15 and their youngest was 5, Theresa and Patrick sat on their porch watching the sun set, the same view they had enjoyed for years. The children were inside, supposedly doing homework but probably causing chaos instead. "You ever regret it?" Theresa asked. "Marrying me so quickly, taking on all this responsibility?" Patrick turned to look at her, his eyes still as warm as they had been that first night. "Never. Not for a single moment. You are the best decision I ever made, Theresa Donovan. You and our children, this life we have built together, this is everything I ever wanted and more than I ever thought I would have." "I love you," Theresa said simply. "I have loved you since you told me to fear nothing, since you promised to keep me safe. You have been keeping that promise for 16 years now. I will keep keeping it for the rest of my life. You have nothing to fear as long as I am here. I know. That is what makes us work. We chose each other and we keep choosing each other every day." Patrick pulled her close, and they sat there in comfortable silence, watching the sky turn orange and pink and purple as the sun slipped below the horizon. Behind them, they could hear their children laughing, fighting over something inconsequential that would be forgotten by tomorrow. This was happiness, Theresa thought. Not the absence of difficulty or challenge, but the presence of love strong enough to weather any storm. She had been so lost when she arrived in Texas, so alone and frightened. But Patrick had found her, had seen her, had loved her. And together, they had built something extraordinary. Years continued to pass. Their children grew and started families of their own. James took over more of the ranch operations, working alongside his father. Emily married a neighboring rancher's son, and Samuel went to agricultural college to learn modern farming techniques. The younger two were still at home, but they would not be for much longer. Theresa and Patrick became grandparents, then great-grandparents. The Double P expanded, prospering under multiple generations of Donovans working the land. The small cabin Patrick had built for their wedding night was now surrounded by a large ranch house with a dozen rooms, filled with family during holidays and celebrations. On their 50th wedding anniversary, their children and grandchildren threw them a party that brought together half the county. Theresa wore a new dress made special for the occasion, and Patrick still wore the same gold band she had slipped on his finger all those years ago. 50 years, Theresa marveled, standing beside her husband as they greeted guests. How did we get so old? Speak for yourself, old woman. I still feel 27 inside. Theresa laughed and elbowed him gently. Liar. Your knees crack when you stand up, and you fall asleep in your chair after dinner. Those are just signs of a life well lived, and I would not change a minute of it. Later, when the party was winding down and most of the guests had gone home, Theresa and Patrick walked down to the creek where their first cabin still stood, now used as a guest house for visiting family. They stood on the porch where they had stood as newlyweds, looking out at the water that caught the moonlight. You remember our wedding night? Patrick asked, his arm around Theresa's waist. I remember being nervous and excited and so in love with you I could barely breathe. I felt the same way. I still do, you know. You still take my breath away. Theresa leaned into him, feeling the solid warmth of his body, still strong despite the years. I was so lost when I came here. I thought my life was over, that I had nothing left, but really it was just beginning. You gave me everything, Patrick. A home, a family, a purpose. You gave me love. You gave me the same things. More than that, you gave me yourself. You trusted me when you had no reason to. You took a chance on a lonely cowboy who had nothing to offer but his heart. Your heart was everything I needed. They stood there in the moonlight, two people who had been young and scared and hopeful once, who had built a life together that exceeded their wildest dreams. They had weathered storms and celebrated triumphs. They had raised children and buried friends. They had worked hard and loved harder. And through it all, from that first night when Patrick had found Theresa alone and afraid by the river and promised her she had nothing to fear, they had kept choosing each other. Every day, every year, through joy and sorrow, in sickness and health, they had chosen love. That choice, made over and over again across the decades, was their legacy. Not just the successful ranch or the children and grandchildren who carried their name, but the love that had started it all. A love that had transformed a lonely cowboy and a frightened woman into partners, into family, into two halves of a whole that would never be separated. Years later, when they were both very old and their time was drawing near, Patrick and Theresa lay in the bed they had shared for over 5 decades. Their children and grandchildren gathered around them, speaking in soft voices, but Patrick and Theresa only had eyes for each other. Do you remember, Patrick whispered, his voice weak but his mind still clear, that first night, when I told you to fear nothing? I remember everything, Theresa said, holding his hand. Every moment, every kiss, every sunrise we watched together, I would do it all again exactly the same way. No regrets, not a single one. You were the best thing that ever happened to me, Patrick Donovan. Loving you was the easiest and best decision of my life. "The feeling is mutual, Mrs. Donovan. You made my life complete." They drifted off together, hands clasped, surrounded by the family they had created, the legacy of their love visible in every face around them. When the end came, it came peacefully, naturally, the way the sun sets at the end of a long day. The Double P continued on, run by their descendants who remembered the story of how it all began. With a woman who stepped off a riverboat, abandoned and afraid, and a lonely cowboy who told her she had nothing to fear. With a love that was strong enough to build an empire, gentle enough to nurture generations, and lasting enough to transcend death itself. Their names were carved on a single headstone near the creek, under the oak tree where they had married, and every year on their anniversary, the family gathered there to remember and celebrate the love that had made them all possible. The story was told and retold, passed down through the years, a reminder that sometimes the most profound love stories begin with the simplest act of kindness, with seeing someone who is lost and offering them a place to belong. And in that small corner of Texas, by the creek that ran through the Double P Ranch, the legacy of Patrick and Theresa Donovan lived on, proof that fear nothing now was not just a promise made on a single night, but a commitment lived out every day for the rest of their lives together.